Well, Matt, you're a DragonRealms player. How you doing?
Doing well.
Okay. Did you participate in the Draughtman's challenge?
Yeah, I did. It was longer than they usually took. It's a weird maze, a very weird maze. I saw a map for it once, but it they got pulled down, and I think they changed the way the maze worked because it was supposed to be complex enough that somebody couldn't map it, but somebody managed to map the thing.
Was it randomly generated?
No, not exactly, but it's so the whole concept of that one was there. I think it was like 5 or 10 people run it at a time, and then they would bring in some other random players to be blockers. Blockers could also get some of the rewards, but weren't competing. Okay, you're running through this maze. It goes all over the place. There are occasionally doors. Doors open or close, seemingly at random. Actually, you find levers as you go along. Those toggle what the positions of the doors, and whether or not they're open or closed.
It might be worth fixing the position.
Nope.
Sorry, I missed it.
That's all right.
It slides down if it's only one, unfortunately. The shirt might be better, or you can try and do 2, yeah.
How's that?
Cool, that's good.
All right. So, and then you could turn off the lights on everybody, and then there were ropes that you could pull, which could give you money, or the golden key, which you need to win the thing, or could trigger traps at you. And then everybody, the runners and the blockers, had access to a magic wand that you could freeze somebody with it, or you could shake it to cause a glow so you could see again if the lights went out. And so it's a run through, and it goes until somebody manages to get a golden key and then find their way to the center of the maze where there's like a white door. But the issue is, again, the lever to open the white door is somewhere completely else. If you find the white door but it's locked, do you wait there until somebody maybe stumbles across the white lever and pulls it just in case, or do you? It's kind of crazy because the maze is kind of crazy, but then there's doors that go from like section to section, and so it's designed to be confusing without being literally. It's not procedural generated, so it was just damn complex. And it was pretty well done like that. So this one went very long. The wands weren't working. Like every time you tried to freeze somebody, it was turning on and freezing the person who tried to zap it, and all that. But it's all in good fun.
Okay. So where are you from?
Chicago.
Okay. Not too far away from here. Well, 6 hours.
5 to 6 hours, yeah, depending how traffic's going.
The Windy City. I was there for WorldCon actually a couple years ago.
Yep. That's
Anime Central.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot that goes on up there.
How do you like St. Louis?
It's okay. I mean, I've never done much of the city. Coming down here for mostly just for this. I've gone through a couple other times to visiting friends when they were in school around here, but other than that, it's just here for the con, so you're pretty much in and around the convention hall the entire time.
Right. So no big plans for the weekend outside of here?
No, not really. Here till Sunday, drive on home, back to work.
Okay. All right. Well, do you want to tell me about your character?
Well, my main character is Chave. He's a bard. I've been playing since 96. I think AOL was still hourly back in the day, and those were some expensive times.
By the hour, yeah.
AOL did its best to try to, you get so many hours a month for your subscription, and then every hour over, But every time you'd log off, it would say, "Hey, before you leave, do you want to check either of these?" And it would give you a couple options. And that's how I encountered any of these games as electronics. Gemstone 3 popped up one time on that, and so I ended up playing that for a couple of days, and then sometime later DragonRealms popped up, and it was called Gemstone DragonRealms at the time, because it was intended to be another sequel of it in a way. Same world. I think it's been determined. I think it's been determined that Gemstone is the ancient history of DragonRealms on a completely other continent. So separated by half a world and a couple millennia, or something like that. But But yeah, and then if it wasn't for one of the numerous crashes that would happen at the time, just because of the internet back then, and everybody would flood the chat rooms. Somebody told me about the front end program that made playing the game significantly easier because you could put macros and highlights and things like that. If I hadn't found about that, I probably would have only played for 2-3 days and then forgot about this and and would have gone on with my life. But it's been a fun game. So
what do you think of the text-based gameplay?
I like it. I mean, I played MUDs beforehand when I was at school and things on Unix and telnetting into a game that somebody coded out of their dorm room and just put it out there for kids, where you run through frequently shared areas like Smurf Village wreaking havoc on things, or an elemental canyon, and role playing was very little, if at all, depending on the culture of the people that were playing the game. It was text based, so I was used to that kind of thing. And coming across something like this, which was just a more complex interface in the first place. I mean, it had, you could go northeast, not just north, south, east, west. Mm-hmm. It's there's angles, wow, and role playing mandated because just being out of character was severely frowned upon and punished. Just like, hey, don't do that, whatever. DragonRealms was even another layer above that, in that there was very little use of numbers as the game started. Gemstone was how I considered standard games before. You play that one, you go out and you fight things. When you attack something, you would see the dice rolls in front of you and hit, and then it would then parse that into a description of your swing and how well you hit and everything. But you still saw the numbers of, oh, did I really miss them? Did I barely miss them? How well did it roll and everything? And you would earn experience, and when you had enough experience, you go up a level and use that level to increase your stats or skills or whatever. And whereas DragonRealms was, well, first off, you didn't see the dice rolls, so there were no numbers there. You had numbers for your stats, your strength, your intelligence, etc. You had skill levels where those were on numbers as well, but you didn't get general experience. You wanted to get better at swinging the sword. You swung the sword, and you would earn ranks in the sword. And your class, instead of being decided when you created your character manager, you could wander around classless until you found a guild you liked, join them, and then they would say, oh, well, before you can advance in this, you need to learn a little more sword, a little more shield, a little more dodging, cast some magic. So you only limit is what you were willing to put the time into learn, because your level in your guild was only an indication of the minimum you could have been to be that level. If you said you're a 10th level character, it means you have at least this much skill in these ranks. You could be massively overskilled and just decide to stop training or stop leveling at 10, or maybe your core skills at 10, but then you decide to train like 5 other types of weapons. Your guild only cares about one, but you could pick up that spear or that hammer instead of just that sword and use them just as well or better. So it allowed for some interesting player choices and player agency on how he wanted their character. Yeah, there was a lot of cookie cutterish back then, because there weren't a lot of variety of 20 years of gear available and different equipment. If somebody found a sword that they really liked, a lot of people started using that sword if it became available openly. But you didn't have to everybody just be the standard. If you're this class, this is what you're using, and this is what I mean. Yes, a lot of rangers were using longbows and wearing leathers. You didn't have to. You could have chosen to, I'm going to be wearing the metal armor and clanking around. And okay, so you're a ranger that doesn't hide very well. It's be harder to level, but you could do it. It was made things for a little interesting in my mind, and kept us around. Sorry, I'm rambling.
No, you're fine. this is your chance to talk for the book, so it's gonna be like a direct transcript, more or less, of what you say.
Oh wow!
Made readable.
You may want to edit it a lot.
So you can be a member of multiple guilds or just the one?
No, you can only be any individual character can only be in one. If before you advance to second, if you change your mind, you could go to another guild and choose to join them. But it would clear all your skill that you had and just give you the starting skill for that class. Mm-hmm. So that means also, though, since it doesn't know, like when you join a guild as a commoner, you're granted some base ranks for like what that class looks for, mm-hmm. And then but if you were learning other stuff along the way and decide to choose another thing, it wipes all of it to zero. So if you were training things outside of just those core ranks, you'd lose all of that as well while going to another class. But you were freely allowed to until you advanced to second in any one class. You could just keep going down the street and find another guild leader and talk to them and join, with a couple exceptions. The more advanced guilds, like Thieves, don't necessarily like you. Thieves Guild was a puzzle to get joined because they're secrets. Technically, if you asked in character, no, there's no Thieves Guild. Organized thieves? That's preposterous. There's crime, but no, there's no shadowy organization behind it. Don't be foolish. But everything was you had that capability of doing that and joining a guild, because if you've got past that, you'd have to re-roll your character, which was essentially it would throw you back into the character manager, and you may end up with the same character name, but you could have changed your look, changed your race, changed your stats and things like that, and then come out with just the starting stuff that any own character had, and anything else you had before that was gone unless you had somebody waiting there to holding on to your stuff or something like that. I used it a couple times. Like, I actually created my bard character before the bard guild opened. The guild wasn't ready to be released when they opened the game in the public, and so when I created it, I didn't know how long it was going to be before it opened, but I knew I was going to need some money for all the starting gear. I'm like, I'm going to need instruments and whatever goes along with it. Mm-hmm. And who knows what that's going to cost. So I joined the traders because their job is to make money, deliver commodities between outposts and just make money. So I do that, but at some point they stop letting you get new contracts. They say you need to advance in the guild. So they try to push you to second level. I'm like, well, I don't want to do that because this character is destined to be a bard. So I walked down the street to the Thieves Guild and said, hey, I heard you guys were looking for somebody, and they would literally beat the trader experience out of you and become a thief, and then said, wow, that was brutal. Walk back to the traders. Hey, I'd like to see you guys again. Again, you lose all your skill. You're back at zero. And I'm like, okay. And then I just go trading until they stop giving me contracts. And that gave me my nest egg. A few weeks later when the guild opened, I had the money to buy starting instruments and weapons and gear and equipment and everything.
Were you one of the first bards then, or bard guild members, I guess? Yeah,
well, I'm one of the first. I wasn't in the game when the thing literally opened. When the event happened of them literally opening the doors, there was an invasion of a faction known as the Dragon Priests. It was that previous in the history of DragonRealms before the current era, there was a time known as the Dragon's Empire, where a cult that worshipped the world dragon, which was a being that possibly almost destroyed the world, and started out as, hey, this is a nice thing, we just try to do this. Well, somebody took control of that and twisted it for power and took over most of the known world, and was massively suppressed the Bard Guild because the Bard Guild was trying to keep broadcasting the truth and what's actually going on there. And so they wanted the Bard Guild to be their propaganda wing, and they said no, so it was suppressed. And so that was the in-game reason why the Bard Guild wasn't open yet when the game came out, even though it had been in-game wise at least a couple hundred years since that empire had been suppressed. The cult was still out there, and so that's what like these dragon priests still would occasionally attack the towns and things like that. So they attacked the town right as the guild was opening, and then got fought off, and then open, ready to go. I think I came home from work for lunch and saw that it was open. So the event must have just happened earlier. Swapped over, joined the character. So I joined the day of. So it might have been one of the first dozen or 2 dozen members that joined, but I have no idea what actually it was. Most of the characters who joined back then have moved on in one way or another. So there are higher level bards, but I don't know if there are any still playing that have been in the guild longer. So but there might be. I mean, there might be 1 or 2 out there. I'm not sure. It was quite a while ago.
So do you do role playing at all?
Oh yeah. I mean, you have to in there. It's you can't just go sit, walk into the middle of the town green and start talking about how the football game went on TV the other day. My characters are, at least the first couple characters started as like just aspects of my own personality, and then as the game kept going, they just from in-game interaction, they each kind of developed a little bit of a personality of their own. My bard's a little bit more outgoing and flirty than I am, and just in the normal course, because it's like, hey, high charisma, that's the thing, do that and play that instrument, and win over a crowd and things like that. And I don't think I've ever been drunk enough to do karaoke, so it's not a thing. So, but it's
not this weekend.
No,
not in the cards.
I mean, that mead is really, really good. So if enough of that is flowing, I don't know. But I'm not anticipating it. But yeah, like I have a character in each guild. Most of them are sorely neglected, and most of them I created with at least some level of at least a concept. If I was going to, keep playing the character regularly. My barbarian is a race called the Rakash that they were a newcomer race to this. At one point, 4 new races showed up. So they were refugees from the far west, fleeing basically a zombie apocalypse. And so I said, well, he doesn't know common. So if other people are talking Rakash around him, you can understand that. But otherwise,
so your character doesn't. Your barbarian character.
My barbarian character, he doesn't speak common, so I just flip over. So obviously, I can see everybody saying normal language.
Your role playing that you can.
But when I role play, I just talk back in Rakash, which means any non-Rakash doesn't understand a word I'm saying. Occasionally, when they publish some part of a partial dictionary of Rakash words. So occasionally, I'll actually translate something like a phrase into that, and so speak in common and say those words. So I'm still speaking the language, but it's still gibberish to anybody that's unless they read that dictionary. So and that's a little difficult. So it was just a concept of that. Now, at the time I made the character, that made a lot of sense. It's been like 60 or 70 game years since then, so him still not being able to speak common is a little ham-fisted. But I didn't play him very much, so at the time he's a newcomer. How is he supposed to know your language? So,
well, speaking of flirty bards, did you ever do erotic roleplay?
No. That's not why I go into this game. It was just a way of being social, It was I know there were a few groups out there doing that stuff, and the GMs once said anytime there was any kind of like in-game meeting or event or things like that, someone somewhere or some group somewhere in their group, because the GMs can see everything people are typing. The whispers, casual conversation, whatever. Whisper, it's just between you and me. And every GM who's in the room can see it. And so somewhere people are whispering some of that stuff back and forth because, we're being naughty, But no, I was just...
Well, actually, they mentioned this earlier. Yeah, so I went to some of the panels earlier to better understand. And Melisane, she was talking about how that she likes to get ideas for what the players want. She's a game master. What the players like for the game, based on like what she's reading in terms of like, oh, this is what they're talking about, and she gets ideas for that about how to better shape the world and better create like more immersive environments. So
yeah, I mean so we used to have an active forums web pages that would for discussion like that. Discord's pretty much taken that over. And those quite often feel more like a conversation just because the way Discord is. It feels more like a chat room than a message board type thing where you had to place a post and trying to follow it wasn't a real conversation. There might have been a little back and forth, but not as immediate as Discord. So actually, I find it harder to keep up with some of the stuff because there's so much conversation in the middle of stuff as opposed to just, here's a post about the game and here's my thoughts on it and then reading a little thing, following the thread of something like that. But I know some folks I've talked with said that that's been a really good tool for engagement, especially with like some of the latest GMs and stuff like that. Just being able to get almost like in some cases immediate or very quick responses on, hey, we got this thing going, what do you think? Or who's here right now? What's your opinion on this? So that's always very handy.
all right, do you do player versus player at all?
I've never really gotten into it. My characters aren't. I've never been circle chasers or level chasers, just going for the higher numbers. At one point it was always kind of neat because you get the newer abilities or something. But then at one point I just kind of got burned a little bit because so the Bard Guild, when it came out, had slated abilities at certain levels, but most of those abilities past like a dozen or 13 or 20 levels or something like that were named but didn't actually exist. So they're slotted to work. So at one point there was no point in leveling anymore. It's like, what? You're just to say I'm a higher level than you? I don't think I care. So everybody that was always like, I just need one more rank, and then what? And I get to level. Okay, then what? It's like, well, then I get to start over again. Okay, then why do you just keep running out there and asking for leveling out? Why don't you just sit here, enjoy the conversation, and in a couple hours or a couple days, it doesn't matter, then ask her what the level is. You don't need to constantly check the level the absolute second you had the ability. And I'm not saying that everybody that PvPs is at that level, but a lot of the people who do regularly, especially hearing the conversations of some of the folks, like there was a PvP seminar earlier today, the player run, are closer to those levels. And I think part of that is also because the people that are at the bleeding edge of the game can get bored because there's not necessarily enough to do to keep you busy when like maybe there might be one critter that you could fight that's a challenge or something like that, or you just need, maybe there's another critter but you still need more skill before you can get to it, so you're slogging away at here. I mean, the GMs do a good job of trying to keep expanding things like that, but you can't tailor development of a game like this to the top 2% of the game. You need to fill in the bulk so that people keep wanting to play and get there. So a lot of those people turn and decide, well, this critter isn't a challenge, maybe you are, and they fight each other. I mean, it's always been an option in the game and encouraged for role-playing purposes. But it's never been encouraged as this is a thing, because like you don't experience hunting players. And there were always some people that were like troublemakers that would try to invoke a fight just so they could kill them and ruin their day, or steal, like when you died, you used to drop your weapon on the ground, and that was a really good weapon. I'm stealing your weapon, ha 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 ha, And there was a lot of bad blood on things like that. Grave robbers were one of the few things that would get like the game in general like up against a player, because like, hey, how dare you we like that.
Take your items after you die?
They could. Yeah, I mean, there are certain things, usually not on your body, but it depends on if you. The death mechanics were that if you died, you could then, if you had favor with the gods, you could depart and your body would be regenerated, but all your stuff was still where you died. And when I first started playing, it was just there. So, like, you died in the street, it's now lying all over the street.
Oh, wow.
So you hopefully there was somebody standing there that was helping you out in some way, like a cleric or something, to tell people so and so's coming back, holding you, trying to make sure nobody walks off with anything. And then at a point later, it made it so that it didn't just fall to the ground. You create a grave, and when you showed up to your grave, if you tried to dig it out, it just immediately dug out. Anybody else trying to dig out, it would take a while, so that would hopefully slow them down. But once it's opened up, it's just a hole in the ground, and you're still taking your items out one at a time. And so somebody else, being sneaky or a bastard, could come by, grab something out of there, and run. So there were some things like paladins had an ability to help mitigate that or prevent it, and then eventually resurrection came in the game. So then you instead of having to depart, you're just brought back to life right where you were. And player versus player back then was usually more in elements like that. There weren't often any kind of like structured tournaments or duels or things like that there are actually now. But also the game meta has changed so much since then. Magic back in the day, every guild was creating their own magic, just with like their own guild leaders, or game masters focusing on their class and their class alone. So who cares how that balanced with something else? Nowadays, like, everything, the magic system in general, a lot more balanced, a lot more consistent. If this is a barrier, this is a barrier. If this is an attack, it's how it works under the same core. So you can actually see parity between some of the classes, and so now it really does become who's better at playing this game, or at least in this element, or theory crafting the way around. Okay, well, I need to. How do I get past your defenses to take you down before you do the same thing to me? And hearing them talk, it's definitely a big. It's definitely like almost a mental challenge in addition to everything else. You just want to make sure, hey, how can we figure out the way of getting about this? But it just hasn't been my thing. I'll watch it occasionally, but getting out there and doing it, I'm just not geared or built that. My characters aren't built that way, so I'm not planning on.
The bard's not the greatest PvP player of all time.
Well, honestly, I was kind of surprised during the PvP thing. There were a couple bard spells that they were saying were like must-haves for every other class if they're going to be PvPing, because this is a great barrier, this is a great buff. So I'm like, oh, really? I'm glad that we're being useful. I found it useful when I do it, but that's just because it's part of my tool set. And but there are certain like magic devices that give you access to other classes spells and things. So a lot of them are using those. And like, hey, cool. We're not a joke.
Well, speaking of spells, I hear Magic's having a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, there's something went weird lately. Magic is going a little wild. I don't know if anybody knows actually what's going on behind there, or those who do know aren't telling. But there are weird fluctuations that have been unexplained. Sometimes if you're a magic user, you'll just sense like a weird torsion in the magic, and then it fades. Or you'll cast a spell and something happens. You'll hear glass shattering, and suddenly you can't do magic for a minute and a half or something like that. Or a weird mana vortex will just form in the air and wander around and float out, or bump into you and throw you around and can cause damage unless you can stop it. And other weird things like that. People have been doing research to try to figure out what's going on, and that actually has been giving, on the meta side of things, some neat little benefits. But actively searching into why is magic so wild exposes you or opens you up to getting those random effects a little more often, because like you're you're stepping too close to the flame, basically.
So if you're trying to research it to help solve the mystery, I guess, then you suffer greater consequences.
Yeah, you can. I mean, the wild effects there are some positive ones and some negative ones, and they're happening to everybody. But you can only research wild magic a couple times a day, and it resets for globally. It's a global cooldowns. You don't know when it is. You just have to see if you can try researching again, and it'll go. And I believe if you research wild until that next reset, those things, the effects could happen to you more often than they would have otherwise. But like sometimes I'm playing and you'll see like a spell will prepare it. You have to prepare a spell. It takes a certain amount of time. It might just snap into full form like almost instantly, or hit with extra power or accuracy that you weren't anticipating because that's not the way the spell normally works. Or it could, warp and get out of your control a little bit, and then suddenly backlash on you a little bit or a lot, depending on what kind of magic it was and how it was being used. If the wild roll happens to fall in that direction.
So 5 people have been abducted into space jail.
Yeah. Apparently, I think it was initially a few more, but a couple of them fell out of that jail like almost instantly. But 5 of them are still there. So that's leaving some characters just still fraught because
some of them are here. Some of them I've interviewed.
All of the ones in space jail are here. So I'm wondering if they
had a secret meeting.
Yeah. I'm wondering if they were kidnapped into jail before or after they registered for SimuCon. It's like, are they all going to be there? Okay, snatch. I'm sure because it's been a prolonged thing, none of them are there without their player's consent because a GM wouldn't just do that to somebody. It's like, okay, for the next X amount of time, undetermined, you can't play the game with your character. Play somebody else, but I want to play this character. That's why I pay this. No, they're all there. Whatever their role play is, their players are a little more aware than the average person of what's going on because you'd have to be informed of that just for the sake of it, and we're willing to have the sacrifice of not playing their characters actively for some period of time for this storyline, and that's kind of cool. That there is that level of interaction on something like this. That's this game spanning. One of the guys, the husband of one of the in-game husband of one of the characters that was stolen, is whenever he's just frantically trying anything magical from where they were taken away to see if he could find a way to bridge the gap, and he's slowly you look at him, keeps getting a little more disheveled and slightly more frantic, a little more insane. And so it's like, okay, so what's going to break first, the cell or him? It's like, dude, when was the last time you slept? Maybe go to decaf, something. But yeah, he's worried about his wife and their friends and everybody else, and it makes perfect sense. Great opportunity for roleplay. And everything that's going on. So, and who knows how long this is going to be. When it started, an event like this one starts, it usually starts pretty hard and then slows down to a bit until they get to whatever it's going to be.
Are you green?
I don't know. Right?
I'm not green. So it's coming in.
Okay.
I closed the chat, so okay.
There you go. You're green now.
All right, sorry. Continue.
Okay. So the first couple days, the wild surges were happening a little more often, a little more frequent, things like that. And then it probably, as I said, it'll slow down to some mean level of, okay, this is happening because an event is going on. Eventually, we're going to find what big bad evil guy is messing with magic, and we'll try to trounce them. And if it's successful, then magic may stabilize. But depending on what happened, maybe some elements of this wild magic might stick around forever. will that be a good thing, bad thing? Is it just going to be is this just a long-term temporary change, or something that might add to the game forever? Just change a little bit about Magic, add a little bit more uncertainty to stuff that's been something that has been seeming a little too cookie cutter. I don't know.
So that's your prediction then? A big bad.
Somewhere there's some big bad evil guy. The BBEG is missing with Magic, and it's somewhere somehow we'll figure out what it is, what or who it is, and there'll be a fight. Something's going to happen. There'll be groups of adventurers from all across the realms that get together and find some way of bringing the fight to the guy. And like any kind of role-playing game like this, it usually ends up with just not diplomacy. It ends up with an axe to the face. And the great thing about that is they've gotten better over the years of making large-scale things like that happen, so that everybody's involved, and it's not like only the top characters do anything, and everybody that's younger just is cannon fodder. No, everybody can do a little whatever they can to survive and to help advance the story and the plot. And it's usually not a I don't know how much of those kind of things are preset, and then it's just like, well, let's see if the players can do it, or if it's just, here, we'll set up something, and then when we feel the players have done enough, we'll flip the switch and say, okay, now the bad guy dies. I don't know how much it is that. I've never been on that side of the curtain to see what it is, but they usually tend to be pretty epic and fun, and people talk about them for quite a long time, and make for some interesting things. Sometimes they end up leading into one of the paid quests that people would then, instead of being an all realms, everybody going after it at once, it becomes, okay, well, now you can sign up, and with your group of 5 to 10 friends, you can go fight the big bad evil guy and do that. And those run for a period of time, and people get rewards and say, oh, that's kind of cool. And that's happened that way in the past too. So,
just a heads up, we may be running low on battery on my end. So, are you still green? Okay, you're good. Just me. I charged that one, but I didn't charge this one, I think. In between, because they only do one at a time.
I gotcha.
Yeah. All right. Well, where do you see the future of the game? You can answer this 2 ways. 1, the commercial product itself, and then 2, where do you see the world going, the internal game world?
I mean, the game product seems to be solid. I mean, they're not pulling away from it. They did close there used to be a few other games that Simultronics ran, and those got shuttered in the last few years. But these 2 were the flagship ones that have kept the more active player base. So those are still running. From everything I hear, it's going strong. They've added free-to-play options and microtransactions like several other games types out there. And apparently that's been doing successfully. So I don't see any reason why they don't really have any reason to change those models. It does make some elements from the game side a little frustrating when it makes not complete pay to win like some games like that are, but like in some games that are some free role playing games, like there's a Diablo clone called Path of Exile. It's a free to play game. There's a lot of microtrans, but they're all cosmetic. They just make your character look badass. They don't actually help you kill anything. They give you giant wings and glowing footprints and a little fancy pet that will follow you around and stuff like that. So you look like, oh my god, this guy's an angel or something like that. But it doesn't affect your stats any. We have some of that stuff, but then they also have like the microtrans little quest events, and you end up finding weapons with elemental flares that will attack out, which we're always told would be part of the enchanting system when that gets filled, but we can't make those. So they're only available through the microtrans. So then, why would anybody ever want an enchanted one? Or even the non-enchanted things that show up in those events are better than things that can be made. And when the crafting became available, we were told that player crafting would have a strong niche because the regular 24/7 in-game stores, that like the weaponsmith that you could walk up to in the middle of town, has generic serviceable weapons. But any player who's worked on the crafting to be able to make a sword decently will make one better. It'll be lighter, or it'll be a little sharper, or a little more damaging, or something. And with a lot of skill, with more skill, could make it significantly better. And then the only things that would still be beyond would be very rare items from limited festivals or especially auctions where like there's one or two of these items. And so that was supposed to be the thing. We'd be filling the major niche between the fancy stuff from events and the general what's available every day kind of thing. We'd be able to make those customs, and that's not becoming a fully recognizable thing at the moment. So we're wondering, it's like if microtrans continue that way, is the player crafting community ever going to come back from that? I'm still learning the crafting bit, so I'm not that big of a horse in that race. But I know some people who have put a lot of time into it who are a little more pissed off about some of that, but we don't know if there'll ever be any kind of change to the philosophy of the microtrans. As to how the game in general goes, I don't know, but I'm looking forward to seeing what it does.
It's events like this Wild Magic thing which keep changing and shaping the way it moves forward. There's probably not going to be that much physical addition onto the game. We've got 5 provinces. Areas within those provinces maybe develop more in a little bit, but there's not like going to be a 6th province showing up or something like that. There's no more map to add to or something like that. And plus, those are very, very big development things, which I think they have 21 people on staff right now, and not all of those are developers. Developing like a whole new large area like a province would be is a massive undertaking that takes a lot. So filling in areas and like, or maybe adding a small village here or hunting area there or something like that. We'll build in areas and fill in the gaps in hunting ladders and areas so that you don't have to keep running from one side of the world to the other necessarily to find this critter's not teaching me any better. Where can I find something a little more challenging? So those always just fill in and add a little lore and add a little variety and make things interesting and scary and fun.
So you said you would have left the game if it weren't for scripting?
Say again?
You would have left the game if it weren't for scripting?
Not well. No, I haven't. I use scripting.
Or I misunderstood.
Sorry.
Maybe.
No, it's So I know a lot of people or I've seen a lot of people that do.
Are you still?
Am I still?
No, the battery's on that too. I only had a chance to charge it briefly. So do you just want to? Here, you just take mine for now.
Okay.
Chat was just telling us.
Okay, so scripting. The bits I use it for are mostly to just save on some typing, make things a little more efficient, things like that. I have seen people over the years that try to automate everything as much as possible so they're not having to pay attention to the screen. I don't see the point in playing that game. Instead, I like playing for some of the social aspects of things, so I still want to be involved. And luckily, there's still a significant portion of the player base that agrees. So if this became just everybody's just scripting and just chasing the high number and nobody's actually talking or doing anything, then it wouldn't be a place I go to have fun. Because as silly as it is, as it may seem, things like that. Some of those folks I've been friends with some of them for years and never knew their real name or what they looked like or ever met them until showing up at a con and then saying, "Oh, yeah, you're that guy." Or, I've had conversations with some people at SimuCon that have been like, a good talk with somebody for like 45 minutes or an hour,
And then I said, okay, what's your name again? Grab their badge. Go, oh, you! I hate you. Good on you. Let me buy you a beer and just have it because it's like their character is an ass. The player was a great guy. Wow, that's good role playing. I mean, or whatever. It's not everybody's play style meshes correctly or together, and that's perfectly fine. It's a large world out there and in the game and out here, so everybody does their own thing. Um, so scripting as a whole, like I said, if it overwhelmed the game, then it just I don't think I would enjoy going into it anymore because the things that bring me back wouldn't be there anymore. But as long as there are those folks that are still there to have a conversation or just it's not every time going in is just okay, gear up and go out and fight a monster. There are sometimes it's just I'm going to sit around the guild and see who comes in and have a couple conversations because I don't feel like risking my life against pick a monster. Um, and since most usually that's a very solitary activity, I'll sit here and chat with the folks that come through. And some days nobody comes through, and some days a bunch of folks come through. And
Just log in and just, hey, look, there's someone here. Let's talk.
yeah, usually I'll find a spot, sit down, and there are a few places that people tend to gather. Um, the Bard Guild way back in the day used to be a really jumping spot. A little less so now, but there are still some. But if you're sitting in a guild, you're generally going to jump into other people in your guild. So it's like, hey, things to talk about with there. Or you go to an area where there's just traffic passes through in general. The Empath Guild usually has people following through at any times because they need to get healed. So you can talk with the empaths and or anybody else, or an area like Town Green has a pond that's with some benches on it that people sit around and they tend to unlock boxes there because there's a domesticated jellypod that acts as a trash can, so it's something to throw the things out at, and it's centrally located, so people will just go there because then it's an easy spot to tell other people, hey, I'm going to be at the pond, just swing by or whatever. It's a landmark, and so sometimes folks will just sit there or whatever. There's lots of places they've changed over the years. For one reason or another, and so sometimes it's a little struggle. Also, as like the player base has shifted, the world's gotten bigger, and the concurrent player numbers have not always grown with the size of the game. So now people get spread out more, and it's like you don't see folks anymore because now they're in that province, or you go to that province and you can't people hunt around here, but you can't find anybody because if they're here, they're only hunting, and you can get back to the main town really easily, so nobody lingers in like these large cities that are really developed and really cool. And this would be a great place to hang out, but nobody hangs out there. And anybody else that considers it goes by there and go, there's nobody here, there's no reason to hang out, so they don't. And so it's like you sometimes you just need somebody to make a stink about, I'm going to be standing here if anybody wants to come by. And then eventually it becomes a meeting spot, and folks start lingering in that spot or whatever. And that lasts for a couple weeks, a couple months, a couple years, whatever. It's the wonderful thing about it. It's still a living game that way. That as much as the GM's code thing, there's no linear progression that you have to do this. So characters are being forced this direction. It's you do what you want when you want, go where you want, and if it's an area that you know, I mean, yes, people tend to go to areas where they can hunt things because that's the main way of progressing your character, but it's not the only thing. And then again, I, um,
Put like 5 10 minutes on that, maybe. 15
yeah.
maybe.
So like folks may go back to places they used to hunt at just so that they could still train up lower weapons, and so now those areas then become populated again, and it it's still just a living game, and that's very cool.
Well, I want to ask about housing and weddings, but we might not have a huge amount of juice left. So,
What was the part?
Housing and weddings?
They're there. I know the housing bit was originally was just a well, I believe it's still a premium player perk. It used to be you could have one per account. I think that's been opened up so every character on a premium account can have one. Um, it's they're regardless of what your facade is, it's one room that you can build however you want. So you could have something that looks like a hovel from the outside and a really nice single room from the inside. So, which is could be a nice step up. But if you've got something that looks like a manor from the outside, it's still just one room on the inside.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Multi-room houses, for technical reasons, can't really be a thing. And then the weddings, those have been interesting over the years because, I mean, originally, it's obviously just a role playing thing, and back in the early days, it was when there wasn't that much game out there. There was the first province and the areas you go to there. Sometimes players would just ask GMs, "Hey, we'd like to have a wedding. Would you help us?" And one of my characters went to a wedding that took place on the Black Moon because it was there's three moons, a black, red, and blue, and it was two moon mages getting married. So you walk through a black moonbeam and ended up on Katamba, the Black Moon, and there was 4 rooms there that GMs just created for this special wedding. And then after the game moved to the web, then it became something a perk you could purchase and then have stuff customized or whatever. And then they had also offered some straight in-game smaller packages, less customizable, but still, you could rent an area that would have dance floor and a fancy cake and be catered and things like that, and just so that you could invite folks. And it was always you choose a cleric you knew to come up with a ceremony. There's no set thing. They were always very nice because it was definitely a show of role playing and the folks being invited. I haven't gone to one in quite a while. I find that sometimes in events like that, at least my bard character has a hard time not heckling, and so I decided it's probably best I stop showing up at weddings because I know people here are trying to keep this solemn and romantic, and I shouldn't be heckling that. But but yeah, no, it's fun and showing still that the people are putting more into their characters than it's just not just considering a character like a random avatar that's not them. The people are investing time to put personality and develop relationships, even just through text and imagination.
All right. So, any wild stories from the game and any wild stories from SimuCon?
Well, SimuCon stories are. Yeah, no. I mean, it's hard to narrow shit down. Like I said, I've been playing for 20 some years. There's been a lot. There have been incidences that where usually what people consider a wild story in the game would be where people were not treating it as a game and were taking things too personally and ended up blowing things up, and that usually ended up with people leaving the game or being banned from it because of that, being trolls or something like that. Usually if it was just like a great storyline going on, then it becomes a good story and part of the history that's shared on and whatever. At SimuCon, well, you get all these people together and add copious amounts of alcohol, and yeah, there's going to be some shenanigans here and there. The platinum instance of the game, which was higher tier of subscription, so there were fewer players. So that means they got dedicated. They got some extra perks and dedicated GM support for their things. There was one year a bunch of them were here, and the hospitality suite for these cons has always been basically a computer lab. We've got 2 computers over here because everybody brings a laptop now, but before Wi-Fi was everywhere, it was just that. And I remember one year, just like 4 people from Platinum sitting in there, chatting with each other, standing next to each other, and then occasionally look at the screen, and one person would hit enter, and then that guy would die because he was sneaking up behind him and just backstabbing him for no reason. He was drunk. They were friends, in game and out, and he's just I just killed him. And that year, I think 3 of the Platinum members got automatically locked out for too many player kills in a 24-hour period, and so that night or the next night at the convention dinner, they had to be granted amnesty from the producer of the game so that so they could come back in less than a month. So I mean, those were good-hearted. There have been some cases where people, again, alcohol and shenanigans don't always end up well, so there have been some downsides, but I try not to think about those too much. But generally, it's everybody has a lot of fun. Karaoke and dance parties. I think we're going to have a 80s theme tomorrow night. Yeah. So there have been things like that a couple times in the past, and they're a lot of fun. Just historically, I was told by a previous con organizer that before we got to a couple hotels ago, we were told by that hotel that we outdrank the Hells Angels.
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, having been here last year and this year.
Yeah, it was a small hotel. Their bar, we drank them out of alcohol 3 nights running. And when we came back the next year, they doubled it up and we did it again. And that's when we were told that we outdrank the Hells Angels. And it's like, wow, that's crazy. So when we started coming to Westport, they had to really stress, but these people drink a lot. And so we never worried about that anymore. And then it's been going fine ever since, though. There was a year or 2 where the con attendees were dropping off a little bit, and then Simultronics needed to take a break from it, so they didn't organize anything official. And a bunch of us just said, well, we are already planning to come to St. Louis this summer, so we're doing it anyways. And so we just showed up and got somebody had a suite room or something like that, so we just bought a bunch of alcohol and just hanging out there. And it was the unconvention year, and so since then it's been more like something like this, where like people will buy a lot of snacks or something like this. Now this is back to being again officially sponsored, so instead of having like a big set meal for dinner or something like that, they're supplying bagels and coffee in the morning and soda during the day, or somebody's running to the store and just bring it into the con room. So there's less swarming the bar and more just what we happen to have sitting around here. But we've all gotten a little bit older over the years. I mean, in general, the population has aged a bit. We still get occasional young folks still coming to play, but it's kind of hard. I mean, in 2024, to find a text-based role-playing game online, you have to be looking for it. And there aren't that many. I would think there aren't that many, even millennials and especially younger, that would think that's something they'd want to play. Compared to the other things they've been playing historically, most of the folks who have and come in young, it's because older siblings or their parents, in some cases, have been playing this game for ages and told them about it and bring them along. So we still keep bringing in new folks like that, but it's. I think the average age has gone up a bit.
So it's up to you. Do you want to do the political questions or not? I think you got a bit more juice since it's not flashing yet.
Not really. That's always even in kind of like in just an open dialogue. It's still kind of like I just don't really like it's useless to talk in an echo chamber because you're not convincing anybody when everybody already has the same conversation. I mean, if the person you're talking to already agrees with you, what's the point of having the conversation? So it's good to have conversations when there's a mixed group like that, but those never seem to go as well as you want them to, as everybody just staying open and having an honest discussion. So I just try to avoid them in general. It's like religion and politics. It's just not.
not things to get into too much.
Yeah. They don't. Well, I try to make them, I guess, go as well as I can, but I'm a political live streamer. But so yeah, if you're SimuCon people or Gemstone or DragonRealms people, and you're into politics, I try to have conversations with people across the political spectrum. I'll say that. So you mentioned other muds. Do you want to talk about those at all?
When I was away at school, so this would have been mid '90s. So a little bit before the internet was available to everybody in general. Those were the early text-based games, like the multiplayer text-based games, like because there were the old micro prose adventure games where you're just looking at a wall of text that you're playing solo. But the mods were multi-user dungeon, and there were a bunch of them that just started popping up like crazy as usually engineering or computer science majors. I think would just code them in their dorm rooms and put them out there, and it spread by word of mouth or bulletin board systems or whatever. Through it, you'd suddenly learn a telnet address and go to it. And they were various kinds depending on what the design thing was. Some were a little more role play and less mechanical heavy, and some were like DragonRealms, where it's like you're just going out and fighting monsters, but how much you're going to be role playing was up to you. Is it just like you're playing D&D and you're just shooting the shit about whatever and just killing while you're killing goblins, or was there history to the game that was being actively developed and encouraged? So there was whatever you'd want to be able to find and be willing to play. I found several like that. That took up way too much of my spare time, as it was.
Still does.
Yeah. But since I'm paying for it, actually now actively paying for it is subscribing. I have a little more control over it. When I was just, it's at school, it's like I should be working on a paper right now. Instead, I am slaughtering my way through this thing, but also having the social aspect of chatting with all the people playing another game that we all like together. So, and that's the thing. It's always been a shared experience like that. I don't know about everybody else, but a lot of folks are like me, especially like back then and everything, kind of shy in real life. So hey, the anonymity of a computer screen does help open up and have some conversations. And then you come to something like this, which might be daunting if especially compared to something like Gen Con with the thousands of people that are there. You come to a place like this, and there may be 60 to 100 people that there used to be at this, but you walk in any room and you know that everybody there gets it, because if they're not playing the specific game you have, the company had 4 games out that were all text-based games, so they get it. Whether or not
you're me.
Well, yeah, I mean there were always some hanger songs too, but still they get it, because it's you're all here for a reason, and it's the same reason. So that breaks a lot of ice when trying to meet new people and get past shyness or embarrassment or something like that, because some of those folks, and who could I talk about this game at home? Nobody there plays it. Nobody understands it. It's like trying to somebody who doesn't care for football at all, and somebody else. Well, did you talk to the game and start jabbing about the games? I have no idea what you're talking about. And similar, if you turn around and start talking about, well, it was in DragonRealms, I was doing this and this, and they're like, what does this have to do with football? There's just a disconnect in the language. But here, everybody's there. Everybody's been where you are or is going to be, and is playing the same game. So it's all everybody's hobby. So there's at least that much in common.
Well, to your point, Certain in the chat says, my parents played this game and introduced me to it when I was like 13. So,
well, awesome.
Do you play other video games?
Oh yeah, but most of those I just single player stuff. Like I'm not a Call of Duty or a Fortnite player or anything like that. I like the graphical ones. I like being able to play at my own pace to as little or as in depth as I want to. So it has to have a good single player story. Um, I think I've only ever tried like those kind of like the multiplayer aspects of game, like with I think I did with Mass Effect once, and that was about it. um, and it was long after the Mass Effect game had come out, so barely anybody was doing that at that point. So it didn't last very long. Um, but yeah, I've got a pretty dense Steam library, but so when I need to see not be reading quite so much, I'll load up one of those and play or something on the PlayStation and yeah.
Okay. Any other hobbies or interests you want to talk about? Also, you're going to die very soon, so that's a
Reading a lot.
That's not going to translate well in the book. You're going to die very soon.
It's gonna die.
No, I know. I meant your mic. Yeah, but and I just saying that like, oh, you're going to die very soon. You know what? We don't have much time.
Gotcha.
Any hobbies
Reading. I enjoy a good book here and there. And then hanging out with friends. I have a good group of friends that we play board games on a regular. So that's always fun. And to get away from, sitting. Mostly during the week, I get home from work, I log on the computer for one reason or another, and this is my community. But then, on the weekends or whatever, it's like, okay, I'll play board games with that group of folks or something like that, and wide variety of those. Those again, similar kind of thing. It's like another group of people that shares a strong hobby, but a little bit different. So,
okay.
Yeah.
You want to take a couple of wild cards?
Wild cards?
These are community submitted questions over here, so just grab one or two.
What do you love most about the text-based game you play? Really, it is the community. All of these folks. If it weren't for all these people still playing these games,
You're dead. We're switching.
if it weren't for all these folks still playing these games, I wouldn't be enjoying it as much. It's that interaction that keeps it going, because just wandering out and killing a troll, it gets a little old. I mean, it's the same thing over and over again. And yeah, I could advance a little bit and unlock a new power. So okay, well now I'm killing him with ice instead of fire or whatever. But it's still just killing the same troll. Whereas it's the interaction with the other players. That's what keeps me coming back. I've been a couple of times when for a couple months or a year or more I've been barely playing. Log in every once in a while just to make sure I'm still there. But then when I have time and I come back into it, and it's the people.
Well, hey, anything else you want to talk about?
Any other questions you want?
No, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I think it does help. I think it helps. I hope it helps too, because it's a long interview. So I think that helps too with the book too. So it's not, because I was worried about page count. I wanted to do 15 interviews, roughly. I mean, maybe I'll do like 13 or 14 or 16 or whatever. But roughly, like between probably 13 and 16 would be best, I think. For one book,
Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks for watching again. Subscribe if you haven't, and share the video around if you want with the other players.